I don't like trends, I don't like copying images, and I don't believe that good design only comes from following the rules. But I do think it makes sense to talk about certain shifts, especially when they don't come from Instagram, but when they actually come from history and culture. So instead of telling you what colors you're supposed to use in 2026, I want to talk about why certain colors are showing up again and again and what that could mean for your own home. Hi guys, welcome back to Interior Insights. If you're new here, my name is Jane and I'm an interior designer, and we started this channel because we got tired of seeing the same basic white interior designs out there that don't say anything about the people who live in them. And I have to be honest with you, color trends are one of the trends that I probably trust the least when it comes to interior design. Because every single year, brands invent a new color and call it the color of the year. For example, with Pantone, who created this like cloudish white, which basically just is a white. And just from the internet's reactions from the Pantone color of the year in 2026, you can see that most people would agree with me. And I think that this brings us to the first color shift that I want to talk about that I think is really meaningful, and that is that wood is the new white. And as you probably know, white has been like the basic primary go-to color in interior design since forever, because white walls always meant this like clean, modern and sleek aesthetic. It doesn't require a lot of commitment, and if you ever want to sell your home or move out, you just leave the white color. But I think in 2026, people are finally realizing that white isn't as neutral as you might think. First of all, of course, there's 1,000 different shades of white. White is one of the hardest colors to actually pick and to decide for, even for interior designers. And at the same time, white reflects everything. You can see every single stain, every mark. And I personally feel like white often has this like demanding attention for everything to look perfect. And that's why I think it's really interesting that all of these like more warmer wooden surfaces taking over the internet and people's homes as just this counterbalance to the pretty white walls that we used to have. And I really love that warm wood isn't integrated as like accents or as decor in the space, but actually they are replacing the white walls and they are becoming the base of the homes. Now this is also of course partly due to the fact that we have a lot of mid-century design coming up again. So we have paneling, veneers, built-ins, visible grain and visible structure of the wood everywhere, and I personally love it. You know I love wood. And also historically, it makes a lot of sense because before we used to paint all of the walls white, wood was actually one of the main materials that you used to clad the walls in. And one of the things that I really love about wood is that it also ages as you live in it. So the texture changes, it gets a patina, and it is just an absolutely beautiful material. Next up is Playful Colors. Now, playful colors are something that people are always really scared of because they're always scared that their home will feel too colorful. And colorful interiors are also often associated with being childish or messy or just too much. But if you take a closer look at design history, playful and colorful designs usually always come after a long period of restrained interior design. And honestly, I also think color is coming back more and more after we had these like long periods of gray and white and beige interiors, and I cannot see it anymore. But what I think is different now is that color isn't appearing everywhere all at once, but you'll see it more as a pop of colors. So as a rug, in a lamp, in a chair. And I actually really like it like that because that's a very simple thing that you can do for yourself to start incorporating color in your own design. Of course, if you want to go even deeper, we have a curated color collection. Each palette is actually broken down the way an interior designer would think of it. So you see where the color comes from in the space, how much of each color to use, the exact color palette, including hex code. It features 23 color palettes, and it acts both as inspiration as well as a system. So if you're interested, links in the description, or you can scan the QR code. Also, I've been seeing a lot of deep greens and more moody and darker interiors right now, usually labeled as poetcore. And personally, I also think this trend is much more emotional than only an aesthetic. So green is one of my favorite colors to use in interior design because it is restorative, it is fresh, and it just brings this like bright but also calming energy. And it is actually one of the colors that our eyes can process the most easily because it is also in the nature and it sits perfectly in the color wheel between like warm and cool colors. So it just has this like perfect balanced design. And so I think that these poetcore aesthetics, or these deeper greener colors that are emerging, are also drawn from this like more nostalgic feeling of living a little bit more simple and a bit more rural rather than in this like super modern technological world that we're living right now. Next up, Art Deco. So Art Deco is basically the opposite of poet core. It is not about coziness, but it is about structure, geometry, and a sense of order. And I think in 2026, we're seeing deeper versions of this style that has existed for quite some time. So burgundy, petrol blue, charcoal, and muted metallics. And in my personal experience, these aren't really happy or fun colors, but they're very serious, they're quite strict, and I also can imagine that this is also one of the reasons why they're so appealing right now. And they work best in spaces that have very strong architecture, so like high ceilings, defined layouts, clean geometry. Next up, muted statement colors. So I told you that people are often scared of color and creating a too colorful design, but at the same time, a lot of people want to start adding more color to their design. And I think a great way to start is by adding these more muted, diluted versions of a proper color. So instead of clean, bright pops of color, we're also seeing colors that are slightly aged or look a bit faded out. So for example, terracotta instead of orange, dusty blues instead of bright blue, and softer reds instead of like the strong primary red. And what I love about this trend is that this is actually how the pigments naturally used to look. So they were never perfect, they were never clear, bright yellow or orange, but historically colors were always layered, complex, and a bit dirty in the best possible way because they were derived from nature. And I also personally think that these colors are much more easier to live with long term because they are not demanding your constant attention. And so I think that with muted colors, you don't get sick of them that quick. One of my favorite shifts that we've been seeing right now is the pull towards more analog colors. What I mean by this is like muted plastics, powder coated metals, and soft industrial blues and grays. Colors that you would usually see on vintage radios or vintage clocks. And I think that this is also part of the bigger shift that we're seeing, that people are being drawn back to a simpler way of living and just a simpler world, rather where not everything was connected yet. And I think that they also have this very like nostalgic retro vibe to them. And I think that injecting these colors in small doses into your design can also create this very beautifully aged and trust within a space. Unfortunately, the audio of the second part of this video got lost, or for some reason it's not existing anymore, so I had to re-record it. So here we are. The next color that I've been seeing a lot and that I believe will make a big change in 2026 is amber. And I think it's interesting because this color keeps being reframed as being like a new color, but actually it is anything but new. And in my opinion, brown is one of those colors that have had a really strange journey and perception in interior design. So for a long time in interior design, the color brown and amber has been treated as very heavy and as dated and as a color that you like avoid at all costs. But I think now in 2026, amber is also coming back because our tolerance for visual weight and for just allowing this visual weight has finally shifted. And I think the reason why amber is such a cool color is because it visually really grounds the space. It sits there quietly and holds everything else together. Historically, all of these amber and brown materials also come from nature. So for example, from earth, soil, clay, different types of minerals. And this is also why I really love amber, because I feel like it behaves more like a material rather than just a plain paint color. And it also pairs beautifully with different types of materials such as wood, stone, linen, metal. The combinations are endless and they're all amazing. One thing I do have to say about brown and amber tones is that you need to pay attention to its scale. So amber works the best when you use it on like larger surfaces and when the color is allowed to spread across walls or different larger surfaces. Next up is the color Pistacchio. So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I have a favorite color trend, and it definitely is this pistachio green. And honestly, pistachio keeps coming back every spring and summer, but in 2026, I believe that the color pistachio will take on completely new dimensions. And that is because there is a bigger trend happening in interior design right now, and it is called foodification. So basically when colors aren't just a pretty picture anymore, but they actually become sensory. And so in 2026, I believe that pistachio will be used to reference taste, texture, indulgence. And it just adds this perfect element to interiors, because when you see this gorgeous pistachio green, you can really like taste it. And of course, pistachio also ties right back into this like nostalgic analog world. And it really just echoes the 1950s pastels or also the 70s. We actually filmed a really cool 70s apartment where also the entire color palette just consisted of this like pistachio green paired with bold orange touches. If you haven't seen it yet, it's one of my favorite tours. It's really cool and really unique. And of course, since Pistacchio also is a green color, it just really visually calms the space. It lets the eye and the soul breathe within a space, so it is a great color to use. And it is also one that is quite easy to apply and where you don't have to be too scared that like the room's gonna turn out all wrong. Okay, now this color trend has also existed within fashion in 2025, and I'm sure some of you will know it. That is this like soft lemon vanilla white. And I think that this is also really telling because we've already talked that pure whites are losing their dominance, finally, in my opinion. And I think that this is also really telling of the change in interior design and in people's taste, because whites are not being used that often anymore. And so this like lemon vanilla version of a white still feels very safe, but at the same time it isn't a white, and it just ingests every single space with this light, crisp energy while still playing a little bit safe. And so these softer and warmer whites behave more like backgrounds. And they ingest a bit of personality into every space, but at the same time, they still let all of the more bolder accents within any space shine. One thing that people often get wrong though is mixing undertones. So this is something you really need to be careful with, because a warmish, yellowish vanilla white can turn quite sour and not very nice. And so paying attention to the undertones of the colors that you pick is really important. If you're interested in the topic of undertones and how to choose and combine them, I have an entire chapter in my color course, so go check that out if you're interested. And now to the last color trend in 2026, and that is ochre. Now, ochre is another color that keeps resurfacing, but I don't believe that is random either, because ochre has always been associated with warmth that isn't decorative, but that just really creates this very holistic and warm architecture. Now, ochre isn't really your like happy yellow color, but rather it is a yellow that has been exposed to time. And aged materials and colors is something that we've really been seeing coming back, and because this ochre color was also originally derived from natural materials, it doesn't feel new, but it feels beautifully aged, and it just like ingests this feeling that this like home or design has been here forever, and that is always a really good small trick to use in your own home. And it works really well both with antiques as well as with more modern designs. And what ochre does especially well is connect a space to light. Comment your favorite interior design color trend down below. I can't wait to find out.